During sprint planning, should there be a threshold number of subtasks under user stories? If yes, should there be another user story created? This goes back to breaking down your actual stories. If you don't think that you can get it done in a sprint, then you should break that down into a different story. Kind of rule of thumb, somewhere between 4 to 6 stories a sprint. You want your stories to be 1/6 to 1/10 of your velocity. That's a lot of math right there, but you don't want so many that you're doing all that context switching, right? You want your stories to be kind of big enough that people can collaborate and work together. The other thing is, I mean, really, there's not a threshold number, but you want those subtasks to be between half a day to 1 to, as Brad said, 2 at the most days. So if you've got more than the number of people in your team times the number of working days, you probably have a bigger story then.
Yeah, Reese, to add on to that real briefly, the smell for me, when we start talking about Scrum smells and things that make my coaching brain tilt my head a little bit like my dog's, is when I hear, is there a threshold number of tasks and should we break things out into another story? It starts to sound like maybe the stories are getting to be too big themselves. There's not a hard rule that says, oh, you've hit 43 subtasks and now you have to break it out. It is that gut feel to say, wait a minute, this thing has now gotten to be so complicated. Do we really understand what we're doing? Do we really understand the value we're providing? Let's go back and look at the story itself to make sure we're crisp on why we're doing it. And then we look for some of those conjunctions. We look at some of those conditional clauses that frequently are touch points to start breaking down user stories into smaller sub-stories, not necessarily subtasks. So now one of the other ones, and this is from Julian, I want to go ahead and read this without real quickly for everybody. What are best practices to handle carryover work, especially related to estimating remaining work and taking credit for completed work? So we get into our sprint planning session, and with the best intentions in the world, we say, here are the things we are going to get done, be it these myriad number of tasks and 36 points worth of work. And we work and we work and we work, and at the end of the sprint, nothing's done. And then what? Well, you end up with two things. As Julie mentioned, you have carryover. And stuff that isn't finished goes over to the next sprint, possibly, to get done. And you have to worry about how do we handle how much stuff's left. So the first thing we do is we recognize we don't get partial credit, right? The team only gets credit. You only count velocity in terms of our ability to deliver value to our customers and to the business. The idea behind doing sprint planning, the idea behind Scrum itself, is to focus on delivering value to our customers with predictability. And that velocity is our predictable ability to deliver value, not our predictable ability to keep business. And so if we are actually getting stuff done, it doesn't count. We don't get credit for it. No partial credit. That being said, we've put some effort into this. And if our product owner pulls this stuff forward and says, let's keep working on it, which is an if. The product owner has an opportunity to go, you know what happened? Here's the magic thing that happened in the market. A great example with a team I work with is they're getting ready to release one of their products that had to do with payments in the payment industry. And 2 weeks before their big quarterly multi-sprint planning sessions ended, Apple Pay came out and their hair caught on fire because holy cow, how are we going to react? Your product owner says, let's carry this stuff forward. Let's go ahead and do this. And the team re-estimates the tasks to be done to finish the work, but you don't change the size of the story. That way you'll notice over time, your velocity will level out, but the work is still the work. The tasks, the stories are still the same size stories that they were. It just took you longer to do it. So hopefully that makes sense. Reese, is there one you have?
Yeah, I have one in around what is the role of definition of ready in sprint planning. So this isn't technically like a by the book Scrum practice. It's something that's come up in the last few years as teams have wanted to get closer to predictable. You guessed it, our favorite word. So some teams, you guys probably know the definition of done. It's setting up a shared understanding of what done means so that everybody can clear that. But sometimes teams are now starting to have a definition of ready. This is what does ready mean? What are things what checks do the tickets need to have, or sorry, stories. I'm a Jira person, apologize.
Yeah, your Jira is showing, Reese.
My Jira is showing. What things need to be checked off to say that we are ready to pull this into a sprint? Things like it's estimated, things like dependencies are knocked out, all questions are answered, have discussed with design I have some whiteboard or idea of what direction visually we're going to go through, different things. And it depends on the team. What are the things that you guys feel like you're comfortable going into the sprint with, still open-ended and still in discovery mode? And what things do you need to have nailed down to get to predictable? Awesome.
So I've got a question from Yolanda Reese, asking about how do you factor in time for look ahead and grooming sessions? Yolanda even says having multiple grooming sessions per sprint. And related to that, should those look ahead or grooming sessions, should those actually be with the entire team or just the three amigos? I love the three amigos. One of the things is to keep the team in flow. Those are great questions. And Yolanda, without getting into the specifics of your team composition, here's the generic answer for it. When we talk about the ceremonies in Scrum, backlog refinement isn't an official ceremony, but when I coach teams and we talk about the trainings that we do, I think we pretty strongly recommend that as teams are getting started, they make sure that they reserve the time necessary for things like their backlog refinement sessions or those look ahead sessions. And you actually end up reserving almost as much time for sprint planning, if not, if you can, the same amount of time for sprint planning that you would for those grooming sessions. When you first start out, you probably do need the entire team involved because of the number of perspectives that you have to have in the team, both in terms of their expertise and in terms of their skill level. Because one of the things you're starting to build when you start out as a team is that rapport, that understanding of everybody's skills and of everybody's talents and everybody's ability to deliver. Once your team continues to go and has that ability to gel, you can probably start pulling it down to the three amigos. And when we say three amigos again, for typical development team, that's going to be someone related to the product owner, someone that looks like a developer, and someone that looks a lot like a tester. To have those three different perspectives for here's the business value of this work, here's the technical amount of work involved to get it done, and here is the real testing work to verify that what was done actually is technically correct and meets our business goals. With those three perspectives, as long as you have that coverage, you can start to keep the team in flow and have them be able to pull back. But I still recommend that on a regular basis, those three amigos start getting swapped out so you don't lose those different perspectives. By keeping those perspectives in there, you start to repeat that anti pattern we talked about during testing where one person takes all their tasks and does all the work, and here you go, team, and you've lost that group commitment. So thanks, Sheila. That's a great question.
And Julian has a question that kind of fits into that a little bit. So I wanted to do this one right afterwards to kind of tie in. So we do big room planning every quarter to break down features, create stories, and estimate. What is the place/scope of sprint planning in this case? So that kind of follows on to what Brad said, that backlog refinement isn't technically a Scrum construct. It's not in the book, if you will. But that big room planning is kind of a higher level backlog grooming or backlog refinement. Sorry. Sprint planning still absolutely has a place in that that's what you're planning the sprint that is coming right in front of you, breaking things down into tasks and really making a game plan on how you're going to get that work accomplished each sprint, not the whole quarter. Make sense?
And so I've got another question from Yolanda. I seem to be picking out the ones that she's putting in. For whatever reason, Yolanda, your questions are talking to me. So here's a pattern we see pretty regularly. What if your product owners are not attending your sprint planning sessions and technical program manager, a product owner proxy, as I'll put in parentheses, is running the show? So that's a great question. My first coaching moment would be to be able to ask both that technical product manager and that product owner, when we can get access to them, if they're really a product owner. And because one of the things we need to make sure we remember about a product owner is that the product owner needs to have and be able to do three things. And that is be available to the team. Because if the team is having to wait for answers and the team is having to wait for solutions and wait to hear back, that team's going to slow down. And then, as we talked about, they're going to get out of flow. They're going to slow down their ability to deliver and jeopardize their commitments and their sprint goal. They need to be knowledgeable, which means they need to be able, when the team has a question, they need to be able to answer. They need to actually have some subject matter expertise and some technical expertise, not enough to actually build the solutions, but enough to when I say, hey, should this be blue and left-handed? People go, nope, they're going to be right-handed, and it needs to be red, but exactly this shade of red because it's corporate red, and I got it from our corporate design guide. And so if I'm available and I'm knowledgeable, I also need to have the authority to make the decision, because if it doesn't do me any good if I tell you should do all these things and then someone comes up and overrides me. And if I can't be available, well, I'm probably not a product owner. And if I don't have the knowledge, I'm probably not a product owner. And if I don't have the authority, I'm probably not a product owner. So the question becomes, hey, product owner who isn't available, do you really want to be the product owner? Or do you want to have a higher level role like a product manager and let this technical product manager actually become your real customer-facing product owner? So hopefully that answered your question, Yolanda. It's a pattern I see a lot.
Awesome. So we've got one from Hector, and this is kind of around another anti-pattern that he'd like to figure out how they can get out of. So our release is 6 weeks, and we have a monolithic sprint that lasts 6 weeks as well. How do we get out of this anti-pattern? So the simplest answer is you don't have to release every sprint. Your sprint is attempting to get you to a potentially shippable product increment. Doesn't necessarily have to be shipped. It just needs to have you need to be hitting your definition of done and do a place where you don't have a ton of extra work. You don't want to do 6 weeks of sprints and then have half a sprint of all your release things. So you want to make sure you're getting to a place where you guys can easily release at the end of that third sprint. If you do 2 weeks, 2 week sprints in there. But yeah, you don't have to tie your sprint to your release cadence. That's not totally necessary at all. Hope that answers your question, Hector.
Yeah, and I think too, one of the things when we start talking about 6 week sprints, there's a reason that the Scrum guide says, hey, your sprint is your sprint is somewhere between 1 week and 4 weeks, but no bigger than 4 weeks. One of the old adages I used to use that I got taught by the Scrum grognards when I first learned about Scrum is, if you estimate things in hours and you're wrong, you're going to be off by hours. If you start estimating things in days and weeks and you're wrong, you're going to be off by weeks. And so the larger your horizon between the beginning of your sprint and the end of your sprint, the harder you're going to have to build that predictability that will actually be able to get everything we thought we'd be able to have delivered over that time horizon. So the pushback I would say is shorten the sprints as well and start looking at the idea of, why are our sprints 6 weeks? What are the organizational constraints that make that the comfortable horizon for planning and the comfortable horizon as a team? What could we do to be comfortable with shorter releases and shorter iterations, even if, to Teresa's point, you're delaying actually doing a customer-facing release for as long as you want? The internal ability to inspect and adapt and actually see forward-moving progress by having shorter and shorter sprints gives our product owner the ability to deliver whenever they want to. So we had another question here from an anonymous attendee. Thank you for attending. The question is, should the team look at the product roadmap, if you have one, at the end of the sprint to evaluate product launch risks and sprint goal validation? Yes, that's a great idea. And this kind of reinforces the idea of the sprint goal to begin with, right? One of the things that Reese, I think, hinted at but didn't explicitly say, I'll talk about it, is part of the reason to have a sprint goal is for your customer advocate, your business representative, the product owner on your team to be able to say, here's the customer-facing problem I'm trying to solve. Here's what I'd like the team to focus on. And it then creates the space for your team to get some innovative solutions. Your roadmap absolutely talks about features and functionalities and date. But what your roadmap needs to start incorporating is the idea that we need to solve these customer-facing problems, and have we done it? So your roadmap starts to become an idea of, hey, by the end of Q4, we're going to put in new functionality to enable customers to do online transfers in their banking app, or actually go ahead and analyze data sets 5 times faster so that they can save more time. What are those problems we're trying to solve versus what are the features and functionality we're going to release? And that's when it absolutely becomes incredibly helpful to look at your roadmap to go, Are we still on track to meeting these larger goals in the forms of epics, in the forms of features? Are we actually towards meeting these goals in forms of big customer-facing needs by doing these sprint goals? And if so, have we done this already, and can we move on and move forward?
Awesome. So kind of along the lines of earlier, you were talking a bit about sizing. We've got a question around what is the best way to size tickets? Should it be equivalent to business days, number of hours, Fibonacci series, etc.? This gets a bit into kind of the theory around, as humans, we are pretty darn terrible at estimating.
We suck.
We're terrible at estimating
we are
hours,
bad.
days. But what we are really good at is estimating things relative to another. So I can say that, is this thing bigger or smaller than this thing? This is smaller than this. We're really good at that. We can even say, it's about 2 times as big. So that's what we try to do with the work, and that's kind of where that Fibonacci series comes in. It's something I'm sure you guys are all familiar with, something called story points. It's a number that's a relative estimate. It's a relative number that kind of encompasses size and effort and risk and all of those kind of things wrapped up into one, that the team can say, like, this thing is similar to this other thing that I've done before. Or this thing is bigger or smaller than its friends. That's really all. Tasks, a lot of teams do tasks in hours. And that goes back to something that Brad said earlier about, like, in that case, they're supposed to be small anyway. So if you're off by an hour or two, it's not a necessarily big thing. Whereas if you were estimating something in days or weeks, if you're off by a pretty good margin, and you've got the potential of putting the sprint at a lot of risk. That should.
I want to add a little bit too. It's when we start talking about estimating. I know there's #no estimates. There's the whole movement around the idea that estimation is just a sunk cost. But when we're coaching teams, when we're working with teams that are just starting up, they're training wheels, and it's the idea that we need to be able to get into the habit to understand how to work together better, understand our capability and our ability to deliver. So when we actually get to the point that we are actually doing some level of estimates in hours for tasks so that we can actually trust and understand what our ability to deliver this realistically is over the next time horizon, or in story points, so we can have a non-time based way to start actually understanding our potential ability to deliver value, we can actually start to do that in a way that then, after we build the confidence in that, starts to fall away, to go, yep, that smaller post-it that we showed, that's twice as big, and this one's almost exactly like that smaller post-it. We know how that is done, and it becomes much more natural, and the need for it becomes smaller and smaller. I see Julian popping in a question we'll get to in a second about that in a second. One of the things I wanted to touch on from another anonymous attendee is, how do you estimate time for allocating maintenance, which is where my brain went when I started answering this question with Reese. How do you estimate time for allocating maintenance of the product and enhancement of the product? Ooh, so that's a great question. This for me is a coaching moment for a product owner. Is I'm not building a Scrum team to focus solely on new features and new functionality. I'm building a Scrum team to own a product. And that product backlog includes everything. All the work's visible. If it provides value, even if it is maintenance, even if it is enhancements of existing products, it's still work. So how do I allocate time? I don't. I put it on the backlog. And I let the team estimate it just like they would new features and functionality, like I would new product development. The products that go in there, the work that we have to do gets estimated just like it would with anything else. It gets prioritized just like anything else. And if it's not being prioritized on the product backlog, the real question then becomes, then why are we doing it? If it's not providing customer value, why are we doing it? And if it is, we need to make sure we're capturing the fact that it belongs in the product backlog at the same level of importance as other stuff that's going on.
So Yolanda has another good one. What if the team realizes that a story is too big and we refactor/split the story? Does it count if we refactor the sprint goal? So a sprint goal, I didn't say this very clearly, and I made it sound like your sprint goal, that theme, everything has to be done in that one sprint. So something, that upgrade process that I mentioned earlier, that whole thing could span like 3 sprints. You want to set smaller milestones in there. So if the whole upgrade process doesn't fit in the sprint, you want to break that down too. You want to say, we're initiating the customer facing portion of the upgrade process in this, and we want to get the our internal account manager portion of the upgrade process done in this sprint, and so you can break that down in ways that it fits inside of a sprint. We know those goals are going to be lofty in a lot of cases and aren't going to fit in one sprint. So yeah, you want to, if a team says, hey, this thing's not going to fit in a sprint, break it up. What will fit in a sprint? What's something we can accomplish in this time period, rather than going, well, we'll see what happens. See if we can get some of it done, I guess. Raz, what do you got next?
Yeah, so I kind of hinted on this. Julia had a question around what's the value of estimating, right? Which is a great question. For me, Julia, I'll first touch on the idea of estimating stories in some sort of relative measure. Right. I tend to still go towards the Fibonacci sequence, but it could be shirt sizes, it could be powers of 2, whatever that is, a non-time-based relative estimation scheme. The value for that gets to be 2 things. One, it becomes a quick and dirty way for your product owner to look at its estimated backlog and start getting an idea based on your velocity of release horizons. Where are some potential places that I can start looking at, grouping together some of these stories to provide customer-facing value, and start ordering my backlog based on relative estimates of how long it's going to take to get that value out the door. The second one becomes, what happens when your team gets better? And I've gone through and I've estimated my product backlog in hours, and my developers all of a sudden, 6 months later, because we know this never happens, but let's imagine the crazy world happens where my developers actually get better at their jobs, right? Or we get automated testing finally done, and our testing tasks get cut by 90% because it all just happened from a magic box that we push, right? When that happens and we estimate things in some time-fixed unit, we got to re-estimate everything. All of our estimates are now no longer valid. Where if it's a relative estimation, our estimation is still just as good. Our velocity just went up because now we have more capacity. And so by using that relative estimation, it allows our team to improve and get better without having to have the sunk cost of having to re-estimate our backlog every time we find some new way to improve. For tasks, it really is trust but verify. And as I was kind of hinting at, as your team gets better and better, and as they start gelling more and more, they may start being able to spend less time estimating tasks because they just know. But Nicholas Talieb has a great book called The Black Swan. There will always be a black swan that comes up. There's always going to be that one user story that has some tasks involved that, wow, we've never seen that happen before. Wow, we've never used Azure. We've never used AWS. We're going to have to all of a sudden learn that makes sure that, great, here's our new thing. Now we need to go back to estimating this in hours again because it's new. We don't understand. And it provides you that ability to say, if we know we have this many hours available to us over the next week, what's our likelihood of actually being able to get that done? It's belt and suspenders. It's trust but verify.
All right. So Allison has a UX question continued.
I love UX questions.
So you may jump in here after I give some
yours, man.
Awesome. So we work so far in advance that usually we've got assets on the shelf for Scrum to pull down. What's starting to happen is that dev is getting behind, and then the assets need to be revisited for any number of reasons, even though the product owner thinks he's got all of this design work done, which isn't really accurate. We used to be involved in release planning and showed proof of concept / high level wires, but now those meetings are too late in the timeline for us. So I'm trying to determine a more collective approach. So I hate to say it, you got to get closer to the team. That team, this is, dev's not getting behind. You guys are getting way out in front. Dev's working at the pace they can, and you guys are there to, you guys are part of the team too. You should have kind of 1 foot in the sprint and 1 foot in the sprint before, but not months before. You want to be there really making sure that the things that the team are working on right coming up, the next things in the backlog are ready to go. But the goal of this whole thing is, we were once in this land of kind of product delivery. You guys were delivering those UX assets beforehand, and the product owner thought that was done. So we're like, design, and then requirements, and then, yes, I'm drawing the waterfall. We got to shift ourselves into this place of product discovery and know that things are going to change. No plan survives contact with the enemy, and that's our sprint. Like, as soon as we get in there and start putting fingers to keyboard, fingers to code, we're going to learn things. We're going to get things out in front of customers. You want to do your UX work, get that out there, validate it in front of customers as quickly as possible. You want to tighten that feedback loop as much as possible. If you guys are doing stuff so far in advance, you're going to not be learning from the real things getting out in front of your customers, but you're also going to get a little white knuckled because you've done a lot of work. And so if something changes, we learn something, you'll be hesitant to want to actually shift because you've made some pretty stuff. And I mean, if I've done all that work, I don't want it to change either. But that's not the world that we live in. Like, we're in a fast moving, we learn things as quickly as possible, and that's the goal of this. So you want to bring it in. You want to get a lot closer to the team. You really want, as we're in backlog refinement and we're doing 2 to 3 sprints out, that's where you're going to live in some senses. And then you're going to want to go, how are we going to test this as soon as you get something tangible for me to get in front of the customer? Hope that answers your question. Do you have anything to add, Braz? I know you love UX questions.
No, preach it, sister. You really hit the big points. And I'm sure, you guys, Allison, you guys are probably seeing some of the things that happen when you go ahead and start building stuff to put on the shelf, waiting for the development team to pick up, whether they're UX assets or marketing assets or anything where there's work done ahead, is the market will change. UX guidelines will change. You'll find out new interaction models that need to actually take into account mobile devices or insert new library that's going to be able to change the way things need to get done. And you have to go back and rework everything. You're actually creating more work for yourself by trying to get it done ahead of time. The hard part is getting that comfort to say, instead of focusing on this area where I feel really confident doing UX, here's the rest of my team that is struggling to keep up. How do I move out of my space of comfort and say, hey guys, instead of me working ahead, how can I help you now? And start introducing the idea of mobbing and swarming, even though it makes me uncomfortable. I may not be a full-time tester, but I could do some manual regression testing with you. Sit me down and show me how to do that. And I can start doing some verification that the UI looks right and is actually going to be delivered properly, as opposed to saying, I'm going to continue to build things ahead of time. So it becomes integrating back into the team and looking at this huge body of work that needs to get done collectively as a whole and committing to it fully as a team. That's a great answer, Chris. Thank you. Awesome. So we went back and talked a little bit about technical product managers a while back versus POs. And a question that came up is, what's the difference between TPM, technical product managers, and a product owner, especially if a company only has technical product managers? I don't care what you call them. From a title standpoint, it doesn't really matter. The role of the product owner is pretty explicit, and you can go to the Scrum Guide. I won't try to regurgitate the Scrum Guide to you. But the point of whether they are a technical product manager or they're a product owner or they have some other title, they really need to be the person who is ultimately responsible and accountable for the decisions that need to be made around the things that should be delivered. What's the customer value we're working on, and what's the things we're delaying working on? Because right now we need to focus on solving these customer problems. And you need to be the person available so that when the team has questions, they're the one who is actually responsible and has the authority to say, here's what you should do. Let's keep going so the team can keep delivering on a regular cadence and increase that predictability. Regardless of their title, if they're available, if they have the knowledge, and if they have the ability to make those decisions, then they can be your product owner and hold that role and wear that hat regardless of their title. And I've seen good product owners, not just from the business side of the organization, but from testing, from IT, from marketing, from any part of the organization can come in and fill that role because they have that availability, that knowledge, and someone then defers and gives them the authority to actually make decisions. I hope that answers that question.
All right, so we have a question around portfolio management. We have a few minutes left, so we're probably going to take just a couple more questions.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we'll answer those questions offline if you guys still have them. So how does portfolio management benefit and or impact our sprint planning? So there are going to be tons of benefits and tons of impacts. But the one thing to make sure that's happening inside your organization is that it's not portfolio manager says, here's our Kanban, here's our roadmap, and here's when you're going to do things. That there's a connection between those two things, that the product owner and the portfolio manager are working together. If there's a program in between, they're working together to make sure that everyone's on the same page and that expectations are being set.
Mm-hmm.
There may be impacts that something shifts, something comes up, we need to move this from here to here. Yeah, that happened between backlog refinement and sprint planning. You may have to do some refinement either at the beginning of sprint planning or set up another session because things changed. But again, the big thing is just making sure that there's a very, very solid line of communication between those two groups.
Yeah, Reese, the one thing I would think of when I think about portfolio management is when portfolio management is done well, what it does is it provides clarity and it provides sense of purpose and makes that sprint goal crystal clear. We are making this goal for this sprint because for this quarter, our program is doing this because as an organization, we're trying to solve these massive issues. And this is where that direct alignment comes straight down from the top of the organization at that portfolio and program level, down to the individual sprint, even to the individual stories and tasks I'm working on today. Julian asked one more question about stories versus tasks. And it's a good question. If we estimate stories using points, is there value in also estimating tasks for each story? Maybe. And I don't try to mean that as a wishy-washy answer. My question to you would be, to answer your question with the question is, how are you actually delivering on every sprint? Are you getting everything done? Do you have a level of predictability? Are you at the point where you look in and say, we've got a stable velocity and we understand what's going to get done and we're right-sizing things every sprint without sandbagging, right? We actually are getting stuff done. If so, it may not be worth it. You may not need to estimate those tasks because you actually understand the things that come up every single time. The place I would keep in the back pocket again would be when things come up new, when there's something different that you haven't seen before, keep that task level estimation in your back pocket to make sure, trust but verify, we actually know what's going on.
And then this is going to be our last question. Julian has, I know, this has been fun. Thank you guys. We do native mobile development. So we have Android and iOS. A lot of times that feels like two separate teams. Any best practices around planning with two sub teams in a Scrum team? Yeah, so I was actually a product manager for Android and iOS teams once upon a time, product owner. And so that was a challenge, keeping them on the same page. We actually had them as two separate teams. And there was a lot of confusion around, well, you guys learned something and you didn't tell us, and we felt like we were out of the loop on this, and this changed, and we were only, so you want to really make sure if you are going to have those as kind of two teams that you do meet together and you do have any of those like backlog grooming together and even some sprint planning. It sounds like from this question you guys actually have iOS and Android as one team and they're kind of two sub teams. And sometimes that can feel like, oh, we're spending this time talking about your stuff and now we're going to spend this time talking about our stuff. So I would say best practices is really to make sure that when you are talking about those, when those stories are truly vertically sliced stories that slice through both the Android and iOS application and API, if you've got them in there too, that those things are fully sliced through that whole thing. So you're not just talking about like, oh, okay, well, right now we're going to talk about the 5 features that Android is working on, and this time we're going to talk about the 5 features that iOS is working on. So you really want to treat them like any other Scrum team that is working on a vertically sliced product increment, something that is valuable and independent, and that they're all playing their part. But yeah, take it to the team, see what works, retro on it, and make sure that you guys everybody's getting what they're getting, and you guys as a collective team come up with some solutions. So Speaking of retro,
Speaking of
Rez is going to
retro.
talk to you guys for just another second.
Yeah, speaking of retro, that is actually going to be the next topic for our tactical webinar series, is all things sprint retrospectives. We already have a few questions around the topic lined up, but stay tuned for the date and time for the webinar, and I hope you guys enjoyed the hour. We certainly did, and I hope that it was of value to you. Thanks for joining us, and see you soon.
Thank
Bye.
you guys. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.